Wednesday, November 19th.
Yes.
Friday.
At Hockey World, how you doing? All right, so we're back with Hall of Famer Kevin Allen and Mike.
Hall of Famer Kevin Allen and Mike.
And Mike. Hello, Hockey World. It is Wednesday, November 19th, 2014.
I'm Michael Lagello.
I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today.
And I'm Eklund, and you're watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com, and both of you have far more interesting stories. You got to check out the Cranky Hockey Writers podcast to hear some great stories from the Hall of Fame weekend with Kevin. That was a lot of fun. And then Mike, poor Mike's in Buffalo. Mike, what are you okay up there? I'm just.
I'm relatively unscathed, unlike some of my friends. The area of Buffalo that I live in only got 3 or 4 inches, which is not bad. And
right.
But where my mother lives in the suburbs in Cheektowaga or south of the city, they got 4 feet.
Oh.
4 feet of snow in 24 hours, less than 24 hours. And they're getting more snow today. We just got a dusting, so the thing is, it's like, our area I can get around and there's no problem, but I can't go anywhere because the highway is closed and some of the roads are impassable. It's so much snow that some of the snow plows couldn't get through the snow because there was so much on the road.
That's insane. Come on, now that's just.
Yeah, I think winter's officially here. We were dusted this morning. It's not anything we can't handle in Michigan. But my son last night, Eklund, when I ended up going to into the Hall of Fame, all my family members flew into or drove into Michigan, and then we rented a minivan and we went up to Toronto. But and then when we came home yesterday, it was nice for me. We got back to the Ann Arbor area and we were home, and I have another daughter who went to Plymouth, and my one daughter flew back to South Carolina. Well, my son and my daughter-in-law and their 2 babies had to head back to Chicago, and I guess that was quite an experience because the Midwest is getting pretty hard by snow, so they got home pretty late. It was a long, long drive. So at one point, my son said they went like 10 miles in an hour, and another time they were stopped for 45 minutes. So some of that. Snow from the Buffalo area is coming that way. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, here's the time lapse. This is incredible. This thing's taking YouTube by storm.
And the interesting thing is you can see the First Niagara Center right there in the center of the screen.
That's right there. Right, that's First Niagara Center.
That's the lake, and the
literally
lake,
a wall of snow approaching.
Right. And basically that's the entire, that's where Lackawanna and Orchard Park where the Buffalo Bills play, all that area that's covered with snow. I have a picture up on my I think I put it on Twitter where my area had blue skies, and you could see this basically looks like the spaceship from Independence Day covering the southern tier. So it was it's really stark, the difference, but
yeah, that's great.
To the point that the underrated movie, by the way.
Yeah, I actually like it.
It is. I agree with you. I loved Independence Day.
I think that's a great movie. That's to me is the argument against the Academy Awards. Like, everybody I know likes that movie, but that kind of movie, which was very entertaining, very well liked by everyone who saw it, never comes up, in terms of getting an award. And yet everybody loves that movie. And a lot of Academy Award-winning pictures are not necessarily movies that people like to go at the mainstream.
Yeah, that movie is sort of an homage to the 50s alien movies, though, and then it's sort of like, I worked at a movie theater when that movie came out. I was a manager at a movie theater, and it drew like crazy. But it was a July 4th movie, obviously, with the title Independence Day, and it was just one of those summer blockbuster type of movies that doesn't get taken seriously by the Academy.
No.
Even though it had Will Smith, who's a pretty damn good actor, and a lot of other good character actors. But the one final thing about the whole Buffalo situation is that San Jose was in town. They were able to play the game. The area around the arena wasn't horrible, so they figured if they were there, they would get the game played, and it was on NBC last night. But the Sabres announced that anybody who couldn't make the game because of travel bans and things of that nature would get their tickets exchanged for other games. So if you watched any of the game last night, it looked, there was maybe 1,000, maybe 1,500 people in the arena.
Yeah, and then Slam up in Canada.
Hmm.
This was kind of classless, I must say. Slam.ca decides to post a picture saying, "No, this isn't Florida. This is Buffalo."
Yeah.
Just like come on now.
I mean, there's extenuating circumstances. I mean, I made the joke but I can do that because I'm from Buffalo. I mean, there have been games like that before, and when it's weather, that's an explanation that's valid. But when it comes to a team, having 4,000 or 5,000 seats filled on a Tuesday night against a good team like Florida has had a couple times this season, I think it's less excusable.
No, unfortunately for the Leafs, the game was not canceled up in Toronto last night. My goodness. Where to start with this one? This is obviously the news today. I just wrote a blog, and it was funny. I started writing it last night when it was 8-0, and I fell asleep, and I realized I still had the 8-0 score in there. I changed it because it did end up at 9-2, which is but still
closer.
I don't think it matters much, Mike. What's your take on this now? Where does this team go?
Well, I mean, the team is schizophrenic. They were 6-1-1,
Yep.
and things were going well. Lost a close game to Pittsburgh last Friday. Didn't play particularly great, but they were still in the game. And then the debacle at the First Niagara Center on Saturday, where they basically didn't show up. But they normally don't show up when they come to Buffalo. I think they go to the Niagara Falls Outlet Mall for some shopping and go out for some chicken wings at the Anchor Bar, and then don't even remember to go to the game. But last night, after an embarrassing loss, after Carlisle, after a number of players had said that they were embarrassed in their performance, to the point that Phil Kessel shoves off a Toronto reporter to saying, "Get away from me," because he didn't want to talk about the game because he was apparently so upset. He would have sort of come out, worked themselves up into a lather and tried to show that they were a better team than that. And a minute and 52 seconds into the game, Jake Gardner lets a guy walk right around him. Jonathan Bernier lets a bad goal in. And that team's psyche is so fragile that once that happened, another goal by Derek Roy, another goal by Taylor Beck, and it was just on. And Toronto fans are sick and tired of this. I mean, they are paying the highest ticket prices in the league for a subpar product. And that's basically what they're getting. One game, they go out and they beat the Chicago Blackhawks. The next game, they lose to Buffalo in Buffalo. And it's gotten old, and I think to the point that they've thrown a jersey on the ice 4 times this year. They're fed up, and they're not interested in the usual explanations they're getting from the players. This is unexcusable. Well, okay, if it's unexcusable, then play better. And that's not happening.
Right. I mean, I guess what I was thinking of, Kevin, is that this fan base has been through, it feels like 4 rebuilds, through this whole process, and I think that's why the patience has gotten so low.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote my blog today too about it, and to me, they're taking inconsistency to its highest level. Go. 6-1-1 like they did, and play and tease the fans, with some pretty good play. But I think the greatest level of frustration is it's really difficult to pinpoint the problem. In almost every other instance around the league where a team is struggling, it's easy to say, well, it's the defense, it's the scoring, it's the special teams. But statistically, the Maple Leafs, I looked this up this morning, are statistically above average in power play. Their goaltending, Bernier's save percentage is around .915. That's respectable.
Right.
This is the year of the goalie. They got plenty of scoring. We know that. They're among the league leaders in scoring. They've played some really good games defensively. They've had some moments when they've played well. That 2-1 game against Pittsburgh. And yet, they've given up 15 goals in the last 2 games against, a Buffalo team that, really everybody accepts is just not all that competitive this season because they're in the midst of an announced rebuilding effort, and then against a Predators team that really doesn't have, they've scored enough goals and they're a much better team, but they have no dynamic scorer on this team. I mean.
Right.
unless you want to call up Philip Forsberg, who certainly is having a great season and looks like he can be a star. But he certainly has no history of that, a long history of that. So go ahead, Mike.
They've made it into an art form, Kevin. That's what it's it's baffling. Easily things just decompensate based on one play. And last night, like I said, 2 minutes into the game, and this is the 7th time they've played 19 games, and 7 times in 19 games they've given up the opening goal within the first 5 minutes of the first period, which is 1/3 of your games. It's disastrous, and especially for a team with a fragile psyche. They give up this goal. Gardner lets the fourth liner named Taylor Beck walk around him. Bernier lets the goal in. It was not, it was a stoppable shot. It should have been stopped, but he misplayed it. But and that happens. The thing is, other teams can recover from that. It happens. There's 82 games. You're going to let in bad goals. You're going to make some errors. But this team, when that happens, you see that glazed look on their faces on the bench, and they start to say, "Uh-oh, here we go." And Derek Roy, who hadn't scored a goal in 38 games, scores about 8 minutes later to make it 2-0, and they're done. There was no fight in that team until it was 8-0, and that is inexcusable.
Yeah, and I think that it really does feel like they play Tampa Bay tomorrow night at home. And it really feels like, they have to win or something is going to happen. I mean, I don't see how they can get around. They have to make a move. I mean, it's pretty clear the personnel mix isn't right. It's pretty clear that when they fire a coach, we talk about this all the time, but it's not always an indictment on the policies of the coach. But whatever he's doing, he's not getting through because they haven't responded. They haven't, after giving up or having the disappointing performance against Buffalo, they came out and they were even more disappointing. What it reminds me of too is we've all had the troubles with our automobile when sometimes something happens and the mechanic can't figure out what's wrong. There's nothing more frustrating than that, because the only solution to that is he's going to make his best guess. Your car's overheating, so he says it's the sensor. So he changes the sensor, and it doesn't fix the problem. Now, you got a new sensor, and everything's good, but it doesn't fix the problem. That's where they are with the Maple Leafs. I mean, okay, maybe we're going to repair the defense. They tried to do that last summer. They tried to repair the defense, but you know what? That's turned out not to be the problem. So now we're going to try something else, and that may not be the problem either. So we all know what the solution to that is a complete rebuild. And
well, the team's check engine light hasn't gone off for 3 years.
No, yeah.
I've been driving around with a check engine light on my car for 4 years, so it's okay. You can do that.
And okay, I am by no means the most brilliant analyzer of the Maple Leafs or of teams in professional hockey. I try, but what they haven't done, what they haven't touched in that 3-4 year span is the core group of this team. You still have Phil Kessel, you still have Joffrey Lupul, you still have Gardner and Kadri and Phaneuf, and they added Van Riemsdyk, they added John, but they have kept the same core. And there is criticism, especially from the fans, regarding Randy Carlyle. They're sick and tired of it. They're sick and tired of the same excuses that he makes about the team not working. Like I said, the Toronto fan base is fed up. I understand that. I'm, deep down, I'm a fan, and I want to see a team that I've followed for my entire life win. But you look at it, it's not. This guy is a good coach. He knows what's going on. He knows what the problem is. He just can't get the players who are under him to implement his plan. And even the players said yesterday after the game, a couple of reporters were asking them, "Are you trying to get consciously or subconsciously? Are you trying to get Randy Carlyle fired?" And Cody Franzen dropped the F-bomb and said, "No, of course not." Now maybe that's what they say to the media, and maybe that. I mean, I don't think that that's what's going on. I think what's going on here is the mix of players that they have is not right for the coach that they have. It hasn't been right from the very beginning. You still have the core of Ron Wilson's team, which essentially was a wide-open skating offensive team, and Randy Carlyle in Anaheim pretty much offensive style. So, that's a fault of management.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that. I've covered the league a long time, and I hear that all the time. They're trying to get a coach fired. That has happened certainly in NHL history. I'm keenly aware that they've some players have said we can't play for this guy, and they've just given it up. But most of the time, that's not the case. They just don't know how to succeed, and they haven't been able to figure it out. And I think, and the idea that a player is not a winner is another one that I hate. And we've had this conversation before. Are you trying to tell me that Joe Thornton, if he got, as I mentioned before, if he was on the LA Kings, they wouldn't have won the championship because he's not a winner? That's just, to me, that's silly. But I think what is true, and I think this is what we have in Toronto, is we have a core group that doesn't know how to win.
Right.
Correct.
They just don't seem to have any idea, how to be successful on a sustained basis. And I think that's why, when Mike says that they haven't changed the core group, I'm reaching the conclusion he's absolutely right on that. And I don't think that these guys are bad hockey players or bad human beings. I think they just don't know how to win. I mean, there's an art to winning. You got to know, you got to figure it out. The Boston Bruins know how to win. The Chicago Blackhawks, with all those wins over the last 5 years, they know how to win. And I just don't know that these guys who are in charge of the Maple Leafs, the core leadership group, I don't know that they know how to win. If you look at it, does Phil Kessel know how to win? I don't know whether he does. Now, he just hasn't been with the right group before that taught him out. Does Dion Phaneuf know how to win? I don't know that. So.
Well, yeah, and Dion Phaneuf is a major player in this. Has to be. He's a captain. I mean, they did go out, to their credit, and bring in two guys over the last 2 years that I thought did know how to win, and I thought they were good pickups. I mean, now you can say what you want to about the money they spent on David Clarkson or Stefan Robidas, but those are two guys who are the kind of guys you'd want in a situation like this. I mean,
yeah, but they're not core players. I mean, yeah. Clarkson should be a core player, but Robidas certainly not in that position. I mean, Clarkson hasn't been. You need your guys who are the difference makers. And the natural leaders of the team,
right,
know how to win, and I'm not sure. But I mean, I do agree that Clarkson one looked like it was going to be beneficial, but it wasn't enough. So.
And he's played better this year, but Clarkson and Robidas are simply ancillary or complementary players on this team. I mean, the problem is that they've and I don't know if they've seriously addressed trying to bring in a difference maker into their top six. I mean, they haven't been able to do it. There have been rumors. There have been rumors about Eric Stahl. There have been rumors about Ryan O'Reilly. Over the years, it could be a product of just being in Toronto and ginning up the mill. But those are the type of players that they have not been able to bring in. Install a guy who has won a Stanley Cup, and Ryan O'Reilly, a player who's more of a two-way player than say Nazem Kadri or some of the young forwards that they have on the team. But I think what's needed right now, and a guy like Joffrey Lupul has actually been a leader with that team, but the problem is he gets hurt every year and he misses a quarter to a third of the season every time, and you can't be a leader if you're not on the ice.
And he's wildly inconsistent and has been throughout his career, even when he's healthy. He has moments when he looks like the best scorer in the world, and then other moments where he disappears for a few games. So into the system.
The guy who I'm not making up a rumor, and I'm not saying this is going to happen, and it would be difficult in terms of the salary cap situation. But the guy that right now who has been rumored to be available out there, who could come in and I would say represent that kind of difference-making, winning mentality, is Mike Richards. And Mike Richards would help them in terms of a player up the middle. And he would help them in terms of grit and determination. I don't know how much is left in the tank, and his contract is very tough. But maybe that's a direction that the Leafs go in. That could be a way.
And he's from the area up there too, isn't he?
From the area,
yeah.
That he would change the culture for sure, and also address. I mean, obviously, when I say that it's hard to pinpoint. We all know they could improve at center ice.
Yeah.
So I think, and that would be a good fit for him as well. He'd obviously get a greater opportunity there to play in terms of minutes than he has in LA, where they have a very good team. But they just lack. They don't have the Zetterberg type player, the Patrice Bergeron type of player, the Taves type of player. I mean, these guys, all know how to win on a nightly basis. They know what's required. They know the effort that's required. They know, and this is even more important, they know how to get that across to their teammates, either through leadership by example or speaking. And I think they all do it in different ways. I think Zetterberg is not a rah-rah type of guy. He leads by example. Taves can do it both ways. I think Bergeron's the type of guy that can pull a guy aside and talk to him. He also leads by example as well. I mean, there's no one like that on the Maple Leafs, and and this is one of those cases where when fans talk about this, it's all in terms of you're not a winner or you are a winner, and I don't think it's like that at all. I think that most of the time when guys don't know how to win, they just haven't been taught. They haven't been in the right environment in order to learn that.
I agree completely. It seems like it's. I mean, as Ken Hitchcock said, you always look for the bottom, and this is the bottom right now. When you lose 9-2 to Nashville at home, I mean, just all the symbolism of losing to Nashville at home. I mean, it's not just your. I mean, you're losing to a Nashville Predators team that the Toronto media never takes seriously. The Toronto fans probably don't take seriously. That also plays into this. This is completely different. Mike, you got something?
Yeah, well, the recipe for this to get uglier is there, and let me briefly explain. The game against Nashville.
All right, I'm going to sit back. I want to see how this could possibly get uglier.
The game against Nashville was the first of 12 games in the next 15 that they play at Air Canada Center. They are going to vacate Air Canada Center for almost a month with the World Junior coming in late December and January. So they're going to end up after that in early January they will have played. After this 15-game stretch, they will have played 22 of their 33 games at home, all over half their home schedule. If things continue to snowball and they continue to lose at home, I mean, then there's probably going to be a coaching change. There probably will be some sort of massive trade. But if they continue to lose and then they go on the road for 7 games on the West Coast and playing the Kings and the Ducks, it's not inconceivable this team is going to get into the Connor McDavid sweepstakes if things continue to go this bad. I'm not saying that it's going to, but it's conceivable if things snowball that it could. And the fans at Air Canada Center will not stand if this team, if they lose 7, 8 games at home in a row, you're going to have massive jerseys thrown on the ice.
Yeah.
I don't see this team falling that low, but that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem. When you have a team like Toronto that has enough ability to play well in spurts, that just exasperates the problem. Because let's just say now that they suddenly play well for 3 or 4 games. Right. Then we forget all the nonsense about making the bold trade or firing Carlisle, and then they go and have another loss. I mean, this loss to Nashville, it's the worst loss in terms of goals against in 23 seasons. Like that's amazing. I mean, there just aren't records, that many records around there. I mean, 23 seasons. They haven't given up 9 goals since 1991 in a 12-2 loss. I mean, that's really remarkable. But if I'm a Maple Leaf fan, the thing that would worry me most would be that. Then they will play well for the next 2 or 3 games, and then this is going to go on like that, all season long.
Right.
And then you don't make any changes, so you're going down the highway, and then you're sputtering, and then you're going smooth, and then you're sputtering, and you're going smooth. That's the worst thing, because then you end up on the treadmill. You don't draft high enough, because this is a team that, boy, couldn't they benefit by a franchise style of player? That would make a big difference for sure.
And the mindset apparently of Brendan Shanahan coming in as team president this year has been to evaluate everything: the team, the players, the coach, the management. He's added Mark Hunter, he's added Kyle Dubas and Brandon Pridham to the group. They got rid of the assistant coaches, got managers. The thing is, though, that everything is in a holding pattern. He kept Nonis, he kept Carlisle, he kept the core. So now the expectation is if they have another subpar season and finish with the 8th pick in the draft like they did last year, that Shanahan's going to have to do something, and he's going to be forced to do something, and it might be completely clean house, fire Nonis, fire Carlisle, trade core players, and then, but the thing is the opportunity to really have an impact like you just said, Kevin, is to bottom out now and get Eichel or McDavid. They're too good. Their goaltending is too good. Their defense is too good, and their forwards are too good to do that. And the only way you could do it is to trade off guys and make yourself bad, but it's too late to do that because of the limitations of the salary cap. So they're stuck in a plastic bubble, and they can't get out.
Yeah. No, I mean, to put in perspective, 23 years, Kevin, that's pretty, so there are children that have been born and graduated college in the time that a loss like this has not happened.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, that's a crazy amount of time. 15 of 18 of the Nashville skaters got a point last night in that game. I don't think I've ever seen that. 15 players getting a point.
Wow.
Yeah, of the 18 Toronto skaters, 2 were pluses,
Right.
two were even, and 14 were minuses. Roman Polak and Peter Holland were -4.
Yeah, I mean, that was just crazy, and I won't move on from it, but it is going to be, it's always a situation in Toronto that's volatile, but right now what you're saying, Mike, what really strikes me about all these home games is, having been around teams before when they go bad, this is exactly what they don't need. I mean, this is a team that should be going on the road for a 5-game road trip right now. That would help them immensely. They definitely need to get the hell out of Dodge, but they're stuck there, and that's really hard. And that means they're going to have to confront this. Maybe that's a good thing, but usually, if teams are struggling, a road trip can help them in a big way.
And the one place that those Leaf players don't want to be right now is at home.
Right.
They walk down the street. They go to the store. They go into Starbucks to get a cup of coffee. They're gonna have daggers being looked at. At them. So
yeah. All right. In other news, the Penguins. This Pascal Dupuis. This was announced in the last hour. He's gonna miss 6 months because of a blood clot in his lung.
Oh.
Yeah. So this is just another. What is it with the Penguins?
Yeah.
I mean.
That just goes back years and years too. I mean, you look at it's almost like this franchise is jinxed. It's just amazing, with and the seriousness of their injuries.
Yeah, this is the same thing that hit Kimmo Timonen.
Yeah,
a blood clot in the lung.
Volkun had that issue as well as the backup goalie, and and it's just remarkable. They've gone through what they did with Mata, and they had a stroke with Letang, and Mary Lemieux, of course. He's gone through what he went through. I mean, it's just, and that's mostly you have to be concerned about his life and the impact it has on his life. But from the competitive standpoint, that's a very tough loss. I mean, we're talking about a Penguins team that really looks like it is better set up for a playoff run than they've had in years. Maybe even better than they were when they actually won the Cup.
Yeah, I agree.
When I look at this team now, I really like it. Well, they were already 1 forward short, in my opinion. Now they're 2 forwards short.
Well, and they had just moved Dupuis back on the line with Kunitz and Crosby. He scored 2 goals again. He scored the only 2 goals for the Penguins against Toronto on Friday. So it looked like he was, and he was coming back from that ACL injury last year. So, this hits him pretty hard. It hits the hard. But, to be optimistic for a second, I mean, the health concerns with Dupuis aside, for the Penguins, they can put him on long-term injury, and they can go out. They would have the cap room now to go out and get another forward, and there are enough teams out there, like Buffalo, who might avail themselves of the opportunity to trade a scoring forward to Pittsburgh for a prospect or a draft pick. So it's sad, but I don't think it's catastrophic for the Penguins.
Well, a little bit it is, Mike, just because I just had this conversation at the Hall of Fame. I was talking to some GMs about the trade market. And they tell me it's non-existent, that there's hardly anybody out there that's available right now. Everybody seems to be waiting, and some of the teams, either don't want to move anyone for ceiling or floor reasons as well. So, it's sort of a complicated deal. I don't know that it's going to be catastrophic, but because sooner or later, as you get closer to the deadline, And the other reason obviously is so many teams believe they're still in the hunt.
Yeah.
So they need more time. But this is a tough blow for them obviously because Dupuis. Last year he had the extended period out as well, and he's an important part. His speed is very important to that team as well. So it's going to be fascinating to see how Jim Rutherford deals with this because he's a very experienced general manager, but he's never been with a team quite like Pittsburgh, where
Right.
the expectations of this franchise.
You got to replace this guy. You can't just let this ride. And this is last week I had heard when the Mike Richards stuff was going down that the Penguins had interest in Mike Richards, and we all looked about like how the hell cap wise could they do that? Mike Richards is a center. Again, we talked about, but he also the thing I had heard why the Penguins had interest in him, which made sense to me, was that he was considered a clutch type playoff performer player, and they looked at that and they said, okay, the Penguins have needed a spark in the playoffs before, and that Richards would bring a winning thing from coming from LA and would bring a mentality that maybe would help the Penguins in the playoffs. What do you think of that one, Kev?
Well, it's interesting. I brought that up to a GM there, and he said, well, if you could figure out who the Penguins could take off their roster to make that work, he said, make sure you call Jim Rutherford because I'm sure he'll have to take that call because, that's just too much of a cap hit.
Yeah.
Unless Dean Lombardi agrees to take a haircut on Richards' contract, but he's got, I think, 5 more years. The difference between Dupuis' salary is he's 3.75. Richards is 5.75.
Right.
I can't see LA taking a $2 million haircut because the one reason they would be wanting to move Richards is because they want to open up cap room to sign Alec Martinez and Toffoli and Pearson. So I think if they do trade Richards, they want to trade him probably or somebody low salaried so they can open up the cap room in the future. So that's the difficulty from the LA point of view.
Unless a guy like Paul Martin was included in this, like there's some situation where you had another player that they could perhaps move. The Kings need defense right now, and they've shown that. That's where I think that Lombardi has a history with Paul Martin as well. There's some that was a name that's thrown out to me when this rumor was put together, and I saw it as okay. That seemed possible.
Well, it's hard for them to move Martin. He's an important part of their transition game. They really want to move them, but the problem is, and I have this from a very good source. They really want to move, and now this is before the Dupuis injury, because I think that changes everything. But before that, they wanted to move one of their young defensemen to make the move, and then do what they had to do with maybe some role players in order to open up the cap space. So I don't believe they have any interest in trading Martin. I mean, I think that with that offense, you need guys that can, who have the good first pass, who can move the puck, pretty effectively. And they have younger players, but they're less proven. And when you're this close, you don't want to rely on the young guys. You want to rely on the the proven guys. So it's just hard for me to believe that a team that's considered such a contender like the Penguins would move such a proven guy. I mean, suddenly you're moving off a proven defenseman to get a proven forward. Are you really ahead?
They have a chance. They have a chance to win it all. I mean, and you're talking about a guy who has had a lot of experience with New Jersey and with Pittsburgh. If they're going to trade Harrington or Pouliot or something like that, who I'm sure any other NHL teams are very interested in those guys because they're young, they have a lot of potential, and they're cheap. So, if there's a potential to make a deal where they can bring in maybe a rent-a-player, I don't think they would want to give up those prospects for a guy who's not locked up for at least a couple years. But if they can get themselves a player who could fit with Crosby but isn't necessarily a top 6, that might be a solution because the cap hit wouldn't be as severe.
Yeah. I'm with you on that one. For sure. I got a couple other fun things to show you guys. A couple little videos before we go. This was I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but Matt Green finally scored last. And Matt Green hasn't scored in quite some time. And his reaction, he hasn't scored a goal in almost 50 games. This is the reaction to him scoring was pretty funny. It just this is a kind of like almost spooky, but let me show you here. Here we go. Here's this is Matt Green. Just his look on his face is just hilarious. He's like, he just doesn't even. That's it. That's all we got.
Unfazed, completely unfazed, like I expected it.
Just look at him like he doesn't blink once through this whole process. He's just staring down the entire thing. I thought that was hilarious. You know, he's an important player for that team beyond scoring, obviously. But you know, it is really funny to see like these players who don't score goals, who come up with goals, you know, out of nowhere. This was a better one though. This was Cole's pass to it's Cole's pass last night to who was this? Cole scored this goal. I was trying to remember. This is Ian Cole passing to Bergeron on the Blues last night. So it's a good one. This is a good highlight. Let me show you this one here. Pull this up. Someday Google Hangouts will have quicker ways of doing this. Here we go though. All right. So this is one of these. This is the this is Cole, obviously, you know, on the Blues, feeding Patrice Bergeron beautifully on the Bruins. This is the kind of giveaway that Hitchcock loves. You know, I'm sure Hitch had a lot to say about this at the end of the game, but yeah.
That kind of play makes Ian Cole the next trade target of the Toronto Maple Leafs.
He fits right in. He'd fit right in for sure. Oh man, yeah. So tonight the Flyers are in Detroit. You going to that one, Kev?
I'm not tonight.
Yeah.
I've got stuff going on.
Yeah, this is. Well, you wouldn't see much of the Flyers team anyway because they're pretty much.
Have we heard anything about the severity of Giroux's injury, Ak?
No, they've been very quiet about it. I'm gonna guess it's somewhere in the 2 to 4 week range. I don't think it's a big injury, but I think they've been very, very quiet about it for sure.
I did watch the Red Wings last night though, on a couple observations. The Columbus Blue Jackets, though they're getting people back, those players are rusty. You know, Bobrovsky, I thought, you know, wasn't himself last night. It's not that he was horrible, but you know, when he's on, you know, he's on. And I didn't think he was on last night. And the Red Wings are still a really interesting team. I mean, they didn't give up many opportunities last night. Howard looked good. They had one blip. It was probably that game against Montreal. I saw Ken Holland at the Hall of Fame, and he thought it was, maybe certainly one of the worst games they had played this season. They lost 4-1, but they played strong again last night. Brendan Smith has really improved defensively, and that team. I see that team now as much more of a contender in the East than I did before. I don't see them up there with Tampa or Boston or Pittsburgh in terms of the all-around depth of the strength of the team. But I see it as a team that could surprise you. Like, if the New Jersey Devils or last year's Rangers can get to the final, which they did, then certainly the Red Wings are capable of that.
Yeah. Oh, I think they would be a terrifying team to play in the playoffs. I think a lot of teams in the East feel that way. When I've talked to people, they do not want to play the Red Wings in the playoffs because they've got such playoff experience and they have such great coaching that a playoff series, you're gonna. There's a good chance you're going to be outcoached.
And their offense is waking up a little bit. Tatar is playing better. Riley Sheehan is playing better. They're playing more like they did last season when they first got called up. And Nyquist is the real deal. I mean, he's a very creative scorer, and Zetterberg is very consistent. Every night. If they could get Darren Helm going with his speed, that would make them stronger still. But the most impressive aspect is it's the same defense as last season. It's the same defense that ticked off all the fans in Detroit when Ken Holland wasn't unable to get Niskanen or Boyle or Strawman. And they're just playing better. They're just playing better. It's that simple.
Well, partly you look at them and you say, okay, they've got that blend that makes for winning teams. They have those veterans that are still good enough to play, and they've won Stanley Cups and they've won championships, and they've got the young players that are coming up. They've got that. There is that blend you see that teams who win championships have, and that's why you can't look past them at all.
Yeah, well, and Yurko scored last night. I mean, Yurko's a very good young player as well. There's a lot. I mean, Mantha's now down coming on there, and there's a little bit of buzz about him. And Dylan Larkin is at the University of Michigan, and there's a sense that he could be a top flight NHL forward as well. In Detroit, there's a lot of optimism about where this franchise is headed. By the way, though, I don't think they're anywhere closer to signing Babcock than they were before. I think the Red Wings believe they have made him a very fair offer, and I think they're willing to pay him a little bit more than Ken Holland is making.
Okay.
I think they're willing to give him up in that $3 million range, but I don't know that they want to go too much more beyond that. So it's kind of, who knows how that's going to play out.
Well, I will tell you that I know why you're not going to the Red Wings Flyers today, because the Flyers are playing in Madison Square Garden against the Rangers.
I didn't quite know where to go with that.
Thank you, Kev. Thanks for trying at least to let me look not idiotic. This is a result of too much partying over the weekend, not enough sleep, and doing my second podcast in 2 hours. I apologize, guys. I have lost it completely. So the Red Wings will be watching that game tonight.
Well, let me ask one thing here, because we talked about it on Monday when you guys were still in Toronto. The most surprising thing of the weekend was the Montreal Canadiens winning 3 games in 4 nights and now having, I think, the best record in the league. They're 14-5-1, and if you look at their team right now, Carey Price is not standing on his head. PK Subban has 12 points.
I know.
Their leading goal scorer has 9 goals. There's nothing out of the ordinary. There's but they are just winning, and it doesn't make sense, Kevin.
No, their goal differential is not where it should be. They're giving up too many goals, I think.
The first goal more than they've scored the first goal.
Yeah. So I think there's a little bit of hocus pocus mirrors going on a little bit here. I mean, it's not that I dislike the Montreal team. I think the ability to know how to win as a team is an athletic talent, and they have that.
And Therrien is apparently a great coach.
Apparently, people put that in quotes. So
yeah, I know.
Let's say this though, he clearly knows how to get the most out of his teams.
Yes.
He really does.
He knows the kind of players he needs to do that with. There's no question. He's.
But would anybody take him over Claude Julien? I don't think so.
No.
Or Mike Babcock. There are a handful of coaches in this league that I think everybody has, 100% commitment in their belief in their system, and I don't think Therrien's in that group. And maybe we're just misreading that.
Yeah.
He's certainly been effective with Montreal. I don't think there's any question about that.
Well, Howell said to me last year, and I really like this quote by a player who was on the team last year, said, Therrien's a gambler, and he got dealt a great deck of cards last year, but he is a gambler. He goes off emotion, but he's getting dealt another great deck of cards this year. So at some point, I got to admit that I'm wrong about this guy.
First of all, I think he's the beneficiary of a team right now that cap-wise has been structured very well. Mark Bergevin couldn't have gone out to make the deal that they did for Sergei Gonchar. They had a woeful power play. I think it was around 5.5%. They trade for Gonchar. Gonchar is going to go in there as a specialist. They trade Travis Moen. They have the ability to take on almost $3 million in salary in the short term with Gonchar, and he fits in. And he helps. Now I don't know if it's going to be long term if he helps them, but in the short term he's helped them get their power play on track. And he was under Therrien before when he was in Pittsburgh, so he knows the deal with Therrien. So other teams would love to have that flexibility.
Yeah. And speaking of Therrien, I thought actually Fleury played well under Therrien. It just seemed like and Therrien has had such great emphasis on defense. Maybe that had a lot to do with it as well. But it's interesting. Along one on the subject of coaches, a guy that I think has always been underrated is Alain Vigneault. I think he's a good coach. I like his offensive style, and I thought he did a really fine job last year with the Rangers and getting them to the Cup final.
Yeah.
And he's smart enough to know to get out of the way. Like, he didn't alter. Like, Tortorella's imprint was still on that team last year. Like,
Yeah.
they still know how to block shots when it counts. They're much more willing to do that, and I think that's just a carryover. Tortorella instilled that competitiveness in him, and rather than change all that, Vino just let it alone. He just put his system in, and they defend still really, really well, and I think that's a carryover from Tortorella.
If I was an NHL coach, the job that I would want is any job following John Tortorella, because Vigneault and Willie Desjardins. Willie Desjardins has enjoyed a great amount of success in the first 20 games of the season because he's not Tortorella, and because his style, his system is not as authoritarian as Tortorella's is. So they seem more reasonable.
It's kind of like, you know what it is, Mike? It's kind of like if you've got your kids aren't behaving, you just put them into a foster home for a year and then bringing them back and thinking you're the greatest parents ever. That's like, to me, that's the way you should do it.
Yeah, that reminds me of when I was a kid and used to collect they were called idiot cards. And one said, I hit myself with a hammer because it feels so good when I stop.
Right. There you go. That's it. And that's how that plays out, right?
Negative reinforcement is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
That's it. So I got a text from a player who's watching the podcast right now. It's pretty funny. Who actually wants Kevin's opinion on something. He says, "Do you think that Dan Bylsma would take the Maple Leafs job?"
That's interesting. We've talked about this before about an American, in a Canadian city. I think he would. I do believe he would. I tell you what, if I was him, I would take that job over Edmonton. I really would. I have faith in Brendan Shanahan. I think he had learned a lot while he was at the league. I think he knows a lot about management style now, and I think he's a guy that works like he has a plan. He's not impulsive. He puts it through. He puts his plan through. I think he's got a group of people he trusts, and I think he'll talk to him about that. But I think Bylsma would be with that group of offensive players they got. I think that would be really interesting.
Let's flip the question around to the player who asks it. Do I think that Brendan Shanahan will offer Dan Bylsma the job? No, because from everything that I have heard, that's not the direction that Brendan Shanahan wants to go. I mean, of course, the Babcock thing is out there, and I think that will resolve itself over the summer if Detroit signs him or if he becomes a free agent and he tries to go someplace else. If they fire Carlisle, first of all, I don't think they're going to fire Carlisle until at least halfway through the season. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if they lose 8 games in a row, they're going to. But if it would take a really long losing streak and a complete loss of confidence in Carlisle for them to do that. If they do that, they have Peter Horachek, who is a former head coach. They have Steve Spott, who they like. It's more than likely they're going to go interim for the remainder of the year.
I don't think they can do that, Mike. I don't think they can do that right now. I mean, I don't think you can go from Carlisle to an interim coach here. And I think the fact that Edmonton's struggling as well puts a little bit of the screws to the Leafs, because they have to realize that someone's going to get Bylsma at some point. They could. I think it increases the chances. I wouldn't be too surprised. It reminds me of of Boudreau's firing in Anaheim, just like out of nowhere, sort of, comes up and.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Mike on this one. I think, only because I think what Brendan would want to do is he'd want to explore his options in the summer and see who's, because there's really no hurry. Like, do we think a coach could come in and transform the Toronto Maple Leafs into a contending team? The answer is no.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you're going to do that, you might as well wait and see who's going to be ready and just put someone in on an interim basis.
The last thing I want to throw about the Leafs before we end the show today, too, is this. I mean, this whole Shanahan-Nonis thing, is anyone else feel as if this team is mirroring a dysfunctional thing that's happening at the top? I mean, I'm not saying that it's totally dysfunctional, but Nonis there's a total feeling that Shanahan is eventually going to be the general manager of this team, and it exists out there, and so many, at least people I talk to, right? And then there's Nonis, who's a carryover from the previous regime, we're talking about Shanahan's making these decisions on the coaches. I mean, you're talking about that, right? So, I mean, at what point is there no stability? Does that stability just trickle down, Mike? Is it possible?
Well, I mean, there may be a certain amount of lame duck situation here with Nonis. I mean, thing is, Nonis, I mean, and this is apparently not a factor. I mean, he's got 4 more years left on his deal, but MLS need prints money, so if they want to fire him, they can fire him. Yeah. You know, from outwardly, from everything that I have heard, Shanahan and Nonis are on the same page. But you know, he did bring in Dubas, he did bring in Mark Hunter, and the assumption is if they do let Nonis go, that Mark Hunter would be the new general manager, and that I think Shanahan would have more of a say-so in player situations, trades, and development.
So essentially,
I don't think he's going to take over as GM. I really do not.
Really?
I think
you agree with this, Kevin?
I completely do. I think what we're seeing here is that this is a new model. Okay.
Right.
We have the old traditional GM model who's in charge, totally autonomous, and then that has evolved a little bit. Now in Columbus, we have John Davidson, who is a president with benefits, and by that, he has a say in what goes on with the day-to-day operations. The GM is not autonomous. Kekalainen, I really admire him. I think John Davidson gives him a lot of leeway to make a lot of decisions. But, I think there's a real respect there between the president and his knowledge of the game. In Brian Burke, I think it's the same situation in Calgary.
True.
I think, he has hired a guy there that, he knows well, he can work with. I think he lets him do his own thing. But, Brad knows that Berkey has been around the block a little bit and leans on him as well. And I think we'll have the same situation in Toronto. I mean, there's an advantage to being a president who is also has their fingers in the management of the team because you can still get your say on it, but not feel the day-to-day pressure that goes on. Yeah, so it's sort of a new model that I think we're going to see more of as well. I mean, it's interesting because LA has that style of president and a GM, and by that I mean Luke Robitaille knows a lot about the game and he's president, but it doesn't work like that in LA. I mean, Dean Lombardi, is purely autonomous, and makes all the decisions on that. So it's to me this is just sort of the league sort of evolving, and it just like businesses have different structures around the country, we have different. So I think that's how it's going to work. I don't think he'll ever make himself GM.
Interesting. Yeah, it is definitely a new model. It's kind of the model that was started by the Islanders years ago that kind of got ripped to shreds by the Islanders, by everybody else, and the Islanders went to their committee type thing.
There's been other things tried before. I mean, there's been we had a three-headed monster in San Jose years ago, and there was tried in Detroit as well. We had a little committee. So I mean, people have tried things to be a little different, but they never stuck. But I think this president model, the president with benefits model, I think
that's your next article, president with benefits. I love it.
And if you're talking about the Islanders when Wong came in and he hired Neil Smith and LaFontaine, I mean that was such a dysfunctional situation that Neil Smith left after what, a month? And then LaFontaine, LaFontaine has found out twice. He's been hired basically as a show pony to go in there because he's Pat LaFontaine and a Hall of Famer, and he did the same thing happened to him in Buffalo, and he was hired and he had no power whatsoever, and that's what happened to him on the island. I mean that was all a symptom of Charles Wong and his bad management style. So,
I agree with you on that for sure. Now, the last thing I do want to show is the Thomas Plekanec night last night in Montreal. All these guys came dressed as Thomas Plekanec. Turtlenecks, goatees, blue helmets. They were seen throughout the building. And somehow they got on the bench. I'm not sure how that happened, but they all sat on the bench as they would see Thomas Plekanec. And they got in the locker room. And then here they are with Thomas Plekanec himself. Which is, this is just hilarious to me. give the Canadians fans some credit on this one. So anyway, that's all the time we have for today, guys. Thanks so much, Kevin and Mike. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We'll be back tomorrow on Thursday with Ryan Gardner. We'll be back. It's hard to believe it's already Thursday tomorrow. This week is very strange. What do you think, guys? Without the buzz, it is just hockey. Talk to you soon.